welcome to everybody. Alessio, why don't I start with you? We're going to look at some of Alessio and Barbara's photographs while we're speaking, and you can talk about some of the images we see, but I want you to start because, I mean, we're so closely following what's happening in Syria right now. You're one of the few people who has been there recently, and tell us first how you got in and give us a sense for what it's like.
Okay, so as you know, Syria is one of the countries that doesn't like that much journalists inside. So to get there can be complicated, especially at the beginning.
Now, and they're not letting anyone in now at all.
No,
well,
quite easier.
But journalists.
But, yeah. And so since the beginning has been complicated and of course dangerous. You have to find the right way. I mean, possibly safe. The best way so far is to get in touch with smugglers, people that make smugglers, yeah, people that make business along the border.
Smuggling what?
Yeah, weapons, fuel, and animals. Not necessarily really bad things, but they know the path. They know. Pardon?
Thank you.
Oh.
Sorry.
Better now? Yeah.
Yes. We want to hear every word.
No. And so with their help, because they know the path, they know the ground, it's easier to get inside the country, basically illegally, because that country don't want you to get there. And after that, you have to be in touch with the army side of the revolution, because they are the one that can let you in without at least trying to avoid to face the regime army, which is something bad, because a journalist probably is dead if it happened.
If they know you are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Actually, I'm wanted. My name is not only mine. It starts to be a lot. Fortunately, we are in kind of a blacklisted. We cannot be cashed by them.
I want to talk a little bit more with all of you about sort of why you do what you do, but let's show some of your photographs. I'm not sure which ones we have, but tell us where this was taken and the story behind it.
Okay. This picture has been taken in February, and south of Homs. I don't know how much you get inside the story of Syria. Homs has been one of the town most hit by the regime. We are 20 kilometers south. The name of the village is Al Qusair, and these are a mother with a son mourning two older son that has been killed by a mortar attack, a regime mortar attack. So the husband has been already killed 2 months before, and a mortar just entered from the window in the house, killed 2 of the 4 sons she still has. And I decided, I think it's a very powerful picture, this, because it reminds kind of a religious figure, and they hide it. It seems only to ask why. We are civilian. We don't fight, and why we have to pass through this.
She looks broken.
Yeah.
Let's pull up the next picture.
Homs, especially Babamro. This is the 5th of February. Is the first day of the siege, let's say, of that neighborhood. They start bomb for 24 days at 6:30 in the morning, stopping around 6 in the afternoon. I don't know why they do like this, and I could personally count myself in 2 hours more than 200 explosions, only in a neighborhood, not in a town, which is quite big. 1 million people used to live there, but it was really amazing how, even to think that the regime was bombing randomly, like a fear starts to rain mortars here and there, without any real target. It was only an ongoing act of terrorism on the city. These are two brothers, and I think he's still alive, even if the house where he was fell on him.
Alessio, because people there don't or have very little contact with Westerners and few journalists, do they feel like the world knows what's going on? Do they feel like the world is watching, is paying attention?
Yes, they know that the world knows what is going on, but everybody is asking why nobody is doing anything for them. Yeah, they know. And they're waiting for help.
So, Josh, tell everybody a little bit about your background, and we'll mostly focus on Afghanistan because you have spent a lot of time here, and I mean, it's sort of the same issue in that it's harder and harder to get these stories in the paper, on TV, get your photographs in the paper. It's been going on for so long that it is very easy for us to tune things out. But kind of tell people, at least based on your latest time there, what things are like on the ground.
Yeah, well, I've worked probably most of the last 6 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I moved to Iraq in the summer of 2006 and have pretty much been covering the wars with one lovely 10-month interlude in Rio de Janeiro in between, but mostly in those parts of the world. And I think, now's an interesting time in Afghanistan. The president, early in his term, sent 30,000 new troops to the country. They have left now. So, it's interesting to look at where we thought we might, or where they hope to be at this point in Afghanistan. I think they hope that the Taliban, particularly in the southern and eastern parts of the country, would have been significantly rolled back or disrupted. I think they were hoping they could focus primarily on training the Afghan soldiers and police to take over and strengthen the Afghan government. And a lot of that, I think the most important development in the past year has been, which has prevented some of that from taking place, has been the spate of what they call the green on blue attacks, these insider attacks where the Afghan soldiers and police are turning their guns on the US soldiers who are there and really fundamentally undermining the partnership. And if you can't, even temporarily has halted missions, or they often go on missions with the US troops will go out, on patrol and, on operations to hunt for the Taliban with Afghan soldiers. And these are mentoring, the idea is these are mentoring opportunities that the Afghan soldiers will ultimately be able to do this on their own effectively. Anyway, so they had to suspend some of those operations because of these spate of killings. I think it's something like 15% of all US soldiers killed this year were killed by Afghan soldiers or police or people wearing their uniforms. So it's become a significant, huge issue for how they, the core of the US military strategy in Afghanistan. And so that's been a big challenge. They had to pull Western US advisors out of the ministries at various times. And, the Taliban is still pretty strong. Just last month, they attacked one of the biggest U.S. and British bases in Helmand province in southern Afghanistan and destroyed something like $200 million worth of aircraft, which I heard was the largest loss of U.S. aircraft since Vietnam. So they're still capable of pretty significant acts of violence, and a lot of the country is still not, I would say, is in their control. So I think as right now we're in a slow motion withdrawal. So the 68,000 U.S. troops that are left, they'll be leaving over the next 2 years. But it's a fragile and a dangerous time for that to be happening. So I think it's an important time to be watching Afghanistan, and we've obviously spent a lot of time and money and lives there. And are the structures we set up in terms of their government and their soldiers and police, going to be durable enough? Is the big question.
That slow withdrawal is not likely to change regardless of who is elected president.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, it hasn't been much of a campaign issue at all. President Obama or Governor Romney, nobody's really talking about Afghanistan, and when they do, they don't have much of a their opinions, their
They
approach is pretty
basically have the
similar.
same
Yeah,
position.
I mean, it's 2014. We're going to get out. How fast that curve will be withdrawing. I guess there's maybe some slight difference there, but yeah, I think, and President Karzai's government as well. I think they're all on the same page broadly that they want the U.S. troops out, or the bulk of them.
Americans are exhausted by it.
Yeah.
How do the troops feel? And did you, when you were there covering it, feel like nobody wanted to hear what you had to say? I mean, in a way, and is it sort of, were you exhausted by it in the same way that many of us are?
Yeah, it's hard coming up with new and interesting ways to cover a conflict that's been going on for 11 years, and there isn't a lot of. You can just tell. I mean, you all probably know better than me. I haven't lived in the U.S. for a long time, but it doesn't feel like people are really paying attention that much. But when I was writing about Iraq, from the volume of reader email, that sort of thing, people, you know that there was a level of engagement. And with Afghanistan, it's kind of like you send articles out into the void, and this silence, greets them. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still think it's an important issue, obviously, but.
Critically important, but challenging and hard for people to absorb and to look at or read about.
Right.
And Barbara, let me bring you in here because, we're talking about places far, far away, and yet many things equally challenging are taking place in our own backyard that we don't see, that don't get covered. Set us up as we show some of your images from your series, but also explain why you wanted to do this and tell the story, and how hard it was to get this story told.
Right. Well, I've spent the majority of my career covering people in conflict, whether it be in Iraq or Afghanistan or Gaza. I've done a lot of overseas work, and I moved to Los Angeles 5 years ago, and I started seeing these, crimes that were happening to people who lived in the inner cities. And nobody was paying attention to them. Innocent victims of gang violence. People
Its own war zone. I mean, it's.
No, they're not official war zones, yet you're seeing the same types of incidences play out. For these families, they are war zones because they're walking to the street to buy a jug of milk and they're gunned down. They're getting hit with stray bullets. And I was fascinated by this. I don't know if it's my Canadian sensibility or what, but I couldn't believe that this could play out in my city. And often we weren't even covering these stories. So I had proposed to my editors that we do a comprehensive look at this issue, how this plays out for families, and what are the consequences after they've been shot? How does their life look? And in this particular photo, this is Rose Smith. She was the inspiration for this whole piece. I met her after she had been shot in the back. She lives in Nickerson Gardens, which is a very dangerous area in Los Angeles. And she heard shots. There were some rival gangs battling, and she heard shots, and she ran to her door because her children were looking out the window, her younger children. And as soon as she grabbed the door to run inside, and she was yelling at them to get away from the window, she was shot in the spine. She's never walked. She was 3 months pregnant at the time, and the bullet missed her child by a blink of an eye. This is her child who was in her womb when she was shot. This is baby Miracle. And she named her baby Miracle because she is a miracle. This child shouldn't be alive. She's actually my youngest victim. And this photo for me is so tragic in many ways because this child has never had a childhood. From day one, she's been a victim of gang violence. And here she is helping her mom into the wheelchair so that they can spend their day, like a normal family would. So.
It's heartbreaking. Show the next images. I think there are two. Yeah, of the same little boy.
This is Josue. He, at the age of 4, he was playing outside of his house in Long Beach with his little sister who was 6. And you see this play out over and over and over again. A gang dispute literally at the end of the street, and shots rang out, and Josue got hit in the head. The children tried to run from the gun battle. And unfortunately, Josue couldn't run fast enough. He's only 4. And his 6-year-old sister picked him up, scooped him up off the sidewalk, and brought him to their front door, laid him on the front door for his mother, and said, "Mom, Josue's been shot." And I mean, these are the kinds of situations that are playing out in many inner cities in the United States. That's the unfortunate thing. The tragedy of this story is it could be told in any city in the United States. And we're not paying attention to this. And for me, the whole reason why I did this story was to create awareness, to remind everybody that, yes, we are involved in conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan and Gaza and everywhere else around the world. But we have to start looking inward as well and seeing what's happening with families in inner city, in communities and inner cities of the United States. And often these families are in areas that there are high crimes, obviously, but they're poor. And I believe that just because you're poor doesn't mean you should have to grow up in an area that's incredibly dangerous.
There is a second picture that goes with this too. I just want to pull it up. Yeah,
this is
Josue with his brothers and sisters.
Yes, this is Josue's family. Little Josue is at the end of the bed. They are an incredibly impoverished family. And at the end of the night, the mom sneaks into this bed too. So you can imagine where all these little bodies end up. There's one bed for the family. And something else to be noted, this kind of stress, the stress of being victimized by gang violence, tears apart a family. So at one point, there was a father in this family, but the stress of this violence eats up an entire family, and now the family structure is broken. And so no longer does the father live here. I mean, it doesn't just affect the person who's been shot, and it affects an entire community. It's like gang violence is like cancer. It just spreads and grows and eventually destroys.
Let me ask all of you this question, because I think it's hard to relate to, I think it's hard for a lot of us to relate to you and what you do.
Yeah.
I did some of it briefly, and then as soon as I had kids, I couldn't imagine going back into those environments because I was too sensitive.
Yeah.
So I guess each of you comment on this. Does why? Does it feel like a cause to you to do this job? Josh?
Well, for me, I think I was a little bit part of the September 11th generation of journal. I was living in Manhattan in journalism school at the time when that happened, and that, I can't remember exactly what we were writing about in school before that, but afterwards, that's all anyone was writing about. And that, I think, how America prosecuted the war on terror has been kind of a defining theme, I think, in a lot of newspapers for the last decade. And so coming into newspapers at that time, that was the obvious, I think that had a lot of my attention, and we all, volunteered when I got the opportunity to go to Iraq. And, it's an honor to some of the people who, my colleagues at the Washington Post, and Dana Priest comes to mind, who broke a lot of these really important stories about what our government was doing in our name overseas, and some of the this treatment of detainees, and the CIA black sites, and these wireless, warrantless wiretapping, all those issues that came out over the past decade. So I think, it's in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think the military and the embassies and the State Department and back home in Washington will say their version of what's happening. So it's pretty simple. I think it is important to go out there and test how that looks on the ground, and interview people like our previous speakers, they have these such compelling stories about how they see reality in their countries. And so I think just adding those voices to the mix is important.
Alessio?
Yeah, of course, it's extremely important to tell the story. I'm going to be quite selfish to answer into this, but one of the reasons that we're out there is because we want to see with our eyes.
With your own eyes?
Yeah, sure. First of all. At
Why?
Least,
Why do you need to see it with your own eyes?
Curiosity, fascinating stuff. Yeah, I cannot answer for all of us, of course, but many people who talk with about this issue. Yeah, just because we are curious, we want to see, we want to touch the situation right there.
And there's a lot of adrenaline involved, and it can be a little bit addictive. Is that fair? I know a lot of junkies. Yeah?
Yeah.
Barbara?
Well, I definitely think that there is an addictive element to being in war zones and covering these stories that are incredibly visceral and just so instant and so incredibly alive in many ways, and it is addicting. And at some point, you have to shut it down. At some point, you have to decide, well, maybe it's time to do something else because it eats you up as well. You know, I think everybody can speak to that who's had that kind of experience.
We were talking last night, and Josh, I think, you know, when I said about being too sensitive to do it anymore, and I can't remember, someone said, oh, you build up, you know, you build a thick skin over time, and you said it was actually the opposite. You feel like you become increasingly sensitive the more time you spend there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it accumulates a little bit just living with that. I mean, it's a low level of anxiety, level of danger, but it's constant over time, and it kind of, I think it does affect you in ways you don't quite understand at the time. But yeah, you know, personally, I hate adrenaline, and I try to avoid it at all costs.
I just comment too on how you, I mean, I'm just looking, Barbara, why don't you just tell us a little bit about that picture before I address it specifically, but this is from one of yours as well.
This is a portrait of Tori in the middle. Her friend Melody Ross was a 16-year-old teenager whose parents were from Cambodia, and they fled the killing fields of Cambodia to come to the United States to give a better life to their children, the land of opportunity, and they decided to let her out this one time to go to the football game, to enjoy the homecoming game. And again, rival gangs were battling out, and Melody was shot in the head by a stray bullet and killed. And her friend Tori was right beside her. And here, the friends and family are watching as they lower her body into as they lower the coffin into the ground.
What's your goal? I mean, what do you, each of you, what do you want your images to do? Wake people up? What do you want them to convey?
For this particular project, I worked on this for 3 years, which is a lifetime for a newspaper. And the fact that they gave me the opportunity to do that is incredible. And I truly wanted to create awareness with this piece. I was driven to educate people and to let them know this is going on, and to force people to look at this and to see it's happening in our communities. And it was really all about awareness for me. I mean, as journalists, we have a lot of power, and we can use that power in different ways. And with this particular project, I wanted to use that power for good, to give a voice to the voiceless and to allow people to hear these stories because they're important and they need to be told. So that's kind of my goal as a photojournalist. I mean, I do primarily social documentary work, and it's a calling for me. I wanted to be a photographer before I ever took a picture, and it never left me, that desire and that passion to tell stories. So that's kind of what I do.
Alessio?
Just want to show the reality, what is going on. Just give to the people as many input as possible, and they will take the decision. They will decide by themselves. But okay, without any specific purpose, only the reality.
We've shown some challenging and difficult things in all of these images. So just for our final question, I want to kind of end on an uplifting note. Josh, you're not a photographer, but you do have an image to share that is one, I think, let's see if we can put it up. You actually took with your iPhone.
Yeah, I would have took it with my Android if I had it available.
Well, okay. Tell the story behind this.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring this, I thought hopefully this would be a little interesting anecdote. So I live in Kabul, which is relatively cosmopolitan for Afghanistan, a little bit more liberal. There are restaurants and bars, even a couple, and there's a golf course, although it has no grass. But this is a Kandahar airport. So I was on the flight down to Kandahar. I would go there a little bit periodically. It's a bit more intense version of Afghanistan. I mean, to an outsider, it seems a bit more distilled. It's more conservative. It's where the Taliban emerged, where they came from, where they still consider their important political territory. You see fewer women on the streets, and the ones you do see are typically more often in the full burqa. It's just it's a place of it's the center of the heroin trafficking business. There's a lot of smuggling that goes through there. So I was coming down to see the situation down there, and this man in the middle was on my plane, and when he got off, there was this complete mob scene, and local press, huge crowd. It was like the Beatles had arrived, And I didn't know who he was, and I thought that was kind of a problem. So I thought, what was going through my mind was he's either a drug lord that I wasn't aware of, or a power broker of some sort, or comes from political kingpin, and I needed to figure out who this was. So I was kind of backpedaling, and so it's all blurry, the picture. But and it turned out, so I asked some people in his crowd, and it turned out he's a poet, and the next night I think he had a poetry reading that attracted 3,000 or 4,000 people, and that was just one of those moments for me where I thought, there's layers going on here that I don't understand, and that, it's easy to fall into these perceptions about what these people are like in this place that you're unfamiliar with. And, to think that in a place where I guess when you think of Afghanistan, you think maybe illiteracy or backwardness or, violence, and this poet could convene thousands of people, in a time when it's not very safe to go across, a lot of people to be traipsing across town, and there are political assassinations all the time. I mean, so that was one of the moments where it was interesting to me. One of the nice things about, I think, the discovery process of being a foreign correspondent is you get to challenge your assumptions constantly, and I think a lot of the issues we've seen over the decade have been this lack of communication or misinformation and miscommunication between Americans and Afghans, and what it is they want and who's the enemy, and a lot of these issues. And I think, more information and more people trying to understand the differences between these two places, can only be a benefit.
Well, thank you all for trying to show those layers to all of us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.